It started like nothing. A quiet road near Marsham, Norfolk. The kind you pass without a second glance. Hedgerows, fields, a van pulling over on the shoulder. No lights. No sirens. Just a discreet stop. 2 officers step out. No urgency in their movement. They've been waiting for this van, tracking it since it left a small holiday cottage less than an hour ago. They walk to the back. Open the doors. 3 cardboard boxes. Plain. Ordinary. But inside? A hidden layer, black plastic cladding, tightly packed. They peel it back. 70 kilos of cocaine. Uncut. High purity. Street value? Nearly £2.5 million. But this wasn't the bust. This was the crack in the wall. Because what those officers had just interrupted wasn't a one-time job. It was a piece of something structured. International. Quietly organized. Welcome to Crimecast UK, where Britain's darkest criminal empires come to light. If you're drawn to the stories buried beneath the surface, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss any UK stories lurking beneath the surface. They didn't look like a network. Not at first. There was no gang tag. No flashy Instagram trail. No violence. Just 4 men, spread across 2 countries, moving in silence. Bert de Jong, 59. A Dutch national. No known presence in the UK, but a familiar name in cross-border investigations. He didn't need to live here. He just needed the right vehicles, the right routes, and the right people waiting on the other side. Then there was Justin Morris, 23, from Slough. A courier. Trusted, consistent, and quiet. He didn't draw attention, didn't change his lifestyle, and didn't stand out. In this line of work, that made him perfect. Hussein Saki, 22, and Saibar Zaha, 21. Both from West London. No prior convictions. No street-level affiliations. They weren't enforcers or dealers. They were the bridge. Messages flowed through them. Times. Places. Confirmations. They operated like a signal chain, short bursts of contact, long periods of silence. And their movements mirrored the way the entire operation was designed. Low visibility. Maximum distance. Places like Marsham, Norfolk, small villages tucked away from city routes. It's easy to rent a cottage. Easy to park a van. No CCTV, no curious neighbors. It looked like a holiday, and on paper, it was. But these locations weren't chosen at random. They were picked for a reason. Discretion. Distance. Denial. A lorry from the continent pulls into an industrial estate. A van meets it. Boxes move. The van disappears into a quiet rental an hour later. To a passerby? Nothing unusual. To the surveillance teams watching from a distance, it was the 4th time in 6 months they'd seen the same pattern. This wasn't the old street model. This was international drug logistics, clean, coded, and quiet. But no network moves without friction. And no one stays hidden forever. Bert de Jong wasn't new to the road. By the time his name reached British case files, he'd already built a reputation across the continent, not for violence, but for movement. He knew the routes. He knew the border checks. And more importantly, he knew how to make things disappear in transit. It started with freight, legitimate hauls. Refrigerated units, furniture deliveries, the kind of paperwork no one questions twice. But beneath the goods, hidden in cavities, false floors, or beneath pallets, was the real cargo. Drugs. Moved in bulk. Tightly packed and never marked. De Jong didn't drive every load. But when the product was valuable, when it had to arrive clean, he was behind the wheel himself. Not loud. Not reckless. Just methodical. Justin Morris played a different role entirely. He wasn't part of any known gang. No social media trail. No unexplained wealth. What made him dangerous was how unremarkable he looked. He drove short-haul vans, operated on back roads, and followed mapped routes with near-perfect timing. When the lorry arrived, Morris was already in place. No waiting. No calls. No questions. He didn't speak to De Jong at the drop site. He took the boxes, drove away, and blended back into traffic like any other delivery van on a weekday afternoon. Behind them, Hussein Saki and Zybar Zaha handled the communication flow. They didn't carry packages. They carried timing. One message in. One message out. Encrypted apps. No saved names. Just devices that lit up only when something moved. They didn't speak often, but when they did, it meant cargo was in play. Every shipment followed a rhythm. De Jong enters the UK. A van changes hands. A message pings. The phone goes silent again. For months, this system held. No arrests. No traffic stops. No chatter on the streets. But the silence was its own pattern. And someone had started listening. Investigators didn't need to intercept the drugs to see the structure. They followed the phones. Watched the crossings. Matched digital footprints with physical ones. The network's strength was its discipline. But that discipline became its map. Because when you do everything the same way, eventually, someone notices. And when they did, the operation that once moved like clockwork was suddenly moving under a microscope. By the summer of 2024, the network had found its rhythm. And on the surface, it still looked like nothing at all. The addresses were quiet. The vehicles were ordinary. And the settings? Chosen for what they lacked. July 16, 2024. A short-term booking made in a false name. One van arrives late afternoon. No rush. No visible urgency. A single driver. A single stay. Nothing more than a quiet getaway, at least on paper. But it wasn't a holiday. It was a handover point. And it had already been mapped by the people watching. Because on the following day, movement began. Justin Morris left the cottage driving the same van that had arrived the evening before. He followed a predetermined route, straight to an industrial estate outside Norwich. Rows of units. Shuttered warehouses. A place where deals go unseen. Waiting there was a larger vehicle, Dutch plates. There were no greetings. No exchanges. Morris stepped out. Collected 3 cardboard boxes from the lorry. Loaded them into the back of his van. Then drove off. No raised voices. No visible signs of criminal activity. Just clean, practiced movement. But they weren't alone. By now, Specialist Crime South officers from the Met had been tracking this network for weeks. Handover points. Routes. Vehicle tags. Every move had been recorded. Every shift is matched against prior data. They had eyes on Morris. They had footage of the drop. And they let him drive away. Because what mattered wasn't just the handover. It was the cargo. The van was watched. The handover was filmed. But police waited. What mattered wasn't the act, it was the evidence. So they waited. Morris returned toward Marsham the same way he'd come. No speeding. No attempts to rear out. To the public, he was just another van on a quiet Norfolk road. But halfway back, officers made their move. The stop was calm. No struggle. No force. They opened the rear doors. Inside, the same 3 boxes. Unmarked. Ordinary. But under the surface, a hidden layer. Tightly sealed in black plastic cladding, carefully designed to conceal weight without detection. When officers pulled it apart, the scale became clear. 70 kilograms of high-purity cocaine. Street value, between £1 and 75 pence and £2.45 million. It was the first major break. And it was enough to turn quiet observation into a full-scale criminal investigation. Morris was arrested at the scene. But he wasn't the end. He was the bridge. And now, officers turned their attention to who might be waiting on the other side. The van stop in Marsham confirmed the product. But to police, it was never just about one shipment. 70 kilograms of cocaine, that was the proof. But what mattered more was the pattern. Because this wasn't a one-time drop. It was a system. Built on repetition. Held together by silence. Investigators began to dig. They traced phone metadata from Justin Morris, contacts, timestamps, and location pings. Then they expanded outward. De Jong's travel record showed repeated crossings into the UK, always in a window surrounding new movement on Morris's phone. Always followed by brief activity from devices linked to Saki and Zaha. The pattern emerged. Dutch-registered lorry. Industrial estate. Van pickup. Rural property. Discreet handover. Return trip. And always, within hours, another signal. Short encrypted messages sent from De Jong's phone. Brief. Clean. Repetitive. Investigators called them delivery tokens. Each one is time-stamped just after a drop. Each one matched to a location, a vehicle, or a contact. These weren't mistakes. They were habits. Surveillance logs confirmed at least 4 identical operations in the months prior. Same lorry routes. Same vans. The same burner devices light up at the same times. No shouting. No turf wars. No signs of violence. They moved with quiet professionalism, minimal contact, encrypted communication, and clean logistics. There were no front businesses. No laundering through nightclubs. Just movement. But while their strategy avoided noise, it couldn't avoid data. They moved almost 500 kilograms without firing a shot. But every move left a trace. And now, those traces were converging. Call logs. GPS records. Message threads. Boxes on paper that began to outline something far larger than a single bust. The 70 kilos in Marsham weren't the operation. They were just the shipment that got caught. What police were looking at now was a supply chain. And it was still unfolding. By the time the cocaine was pulled from the van, the operation had already begun shifting gears. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because just a few hours later, a second vehicle pulled up outside the same holiday cottage in Marsham. 2 men stepped out. Young. Well-dressed. No rush. No panic. According to them, it was a viewing. They were there to see the property. But the timing said otherwise. The van had left that cottage earlier that morning. It had already been stopped. Already searched. Already taken in. And now, as if on cue, 2 more players had arrived at the same doorstep. Surveillance teams didn't wait. Officers moved in. No shouting. No force. Just quiet control. The 2 men were searched. No drugs. No cash. But one thing stood out: phones. Inside those devices, messages. Recent. Direct. Tied to a number already linked to Justin Morris. Not vague. Not coded. Straight links. Dates. Times. Updates on the movement. The texts placed them in the loop. Part of the drop, not separate from it. And when police looked closer, the full picture began to snap into place. Each phone, each name, each location, a piece of the same structure. It wasn't just Morris and De Jong. Now, the pattern connected Saki and Zaha, too. 6 days passed. Enough time for the cottage to be cleared, the van impounded, and 3 men placed under arrest. But Bert De Jong didn't know that yet. On July 23, 2024, he returned to the UK. But this time, officers were waiting. At the point of entry, he was stopped. No resistance. Just questions and a phone. They didn't need to find cocaine, because what they found on the device was more telling. Inside were short, repeated messages, brief digital signatures sent after each handover. They were known as tokens, coded confirmations that a delivery had been made. Time-stamped. Precise. Matched directly with movements already caught on surveillance. Paired with GPS data and phone metadata, each token became a marker. Not of speculation, but of activity. De Jong denied knowing what he was carrying. He said he was just a driver. Just a man making deliveries. But the data said otherwise. The timeline stretched back months. Surveillance footage from industrial estates. Message chains between burner phones. Location data from cars and devices. Then came the final piece. A ledger. Recovered during searches, simple, handwritten. No names. Just dates. Quantities. Drop points. Payments. But when officers cross-referenced the ledger entries with the surveillance records and digital data, every line matched. One by one, shipments were confirmed. Not just guessed. Verified. The numbers added up. Nearly 500 kilograms of cocaine. Moved across borders. Dropped in stages. Distributed through the same pattern, over and over. The network didn't collapse because someone talked. It collapsed because everything had been recorded. Phones. Logs. Cameras. Ink on paper. This wasn't a guess. It was a map. And it led all the way back to the van in Marsham. By the time the evidence was packaged, labeled, and presented, the network was already gone. What remained was the paperwork, months of surveillance, message logs, and a ledger that told its own story. On April 7, 2025, the trial began at Kingston Crown Court. 4 names. 3 defendants. Justin Morris, the courier, had already pleaded guilty. The others fought on. The prosecution didn't need dramatic footage or street violence. They had data. They laid out the case in simple terms. This was logistics-led trafficking. Planned. Repeated. Efficient. One by one, the chain locked in. May 19, 2025. Sentencing. Bert de Jong, 59. Described by the judge as the importation head, the one who moved product across borders and kept the supply chain active. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Hussein Saki, 22. Called a key coordinator with a central role in organizing drops and maintaining contact across multiple devices. He was sentenced to 14 years. Justin Morris, 23. His early guilty plea acknowledged his part as the courier, the physical link between the lorry and the street. He was sentenced to 12 years and 6 months. Zybar Zaha, 21. Trusted assistant. Message handler, sentenced to 6 years and 10 months. In total, 47 years in sentences. One quiet network, taken apart, one arrest at a time. But the real impact stretched further. For law enforcement, this was more than a drug case. It was a confirmation that the modern drug trade doesn't always look like the old one. 3 boxes. 1 drop. But behind it all was a system. A structure designed to be invisible. Nearly 500 kilograms of cocaine moved through rental cottages, industrial estates, and quiet hands. No violence. No headlines. Just clean execution, until the thread came loose. They didn't talk. They didn't fight. They kept records. And in the end, it wasn't betrayal that brought them down. It was the paper trail. The numbers lined up. The messages told the story. And every silent step left just enough behind. This was a modern operation, and a modern collapse. And there are more like it, just waiting to be uncovered. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a story. There's always another case.